Hi, welcome to this lesson about Amazon Cognito Service, which is an identity platform for web and mobile apps. Cognito serves as a user directory, an authentication server, and an authorization service for Auth 2.0 access tokens and AWS credentials. With Amazon Cognito, you can authenticate and authorize users from the built-in user directory, an enterprise directory, or from a consumer identity provider like, for example, Google or Facebook. Cognito is a regional service composed of two main components. We have the user pools and the identity pools. User pools should be used when you want to authenticate users to your application or API, and they provide sign up and sign in options for your users. So that can be done with a combination of an email address and a password or a phone number and a password. You can also enforce multi-factor authentication using SMS or TOTPs, so one-time passwords. And in order to enable that, you simply need to set up the MFA attribute to require for a specific user pool. User pools allow you to manage users and their access. And as we discussed, users can sign up, but they can also be imported or created directly in the pool and join through an invitation. After users are authenticated, they get OAuth 2 tokens, and there are 3 tokens you will receive after you have successfully authenticated, all of them in the JWT or JSON Web Token format. And that includes an ID token that contains information like the username, email, or phone number, the access token to authorize user access to your resources, and the refresh token that is used to get new IDs and access tokens. User pools don't require integration with an identity pool, so you can use them in a standalone mode. And from a user pool, you can issue authenticated JSON Web Tokens directly to the app, a web server, or an API. So now let's have a look at the authentication flow using Cognito user pools. First of all, the user would try to connect to the app. For that, they would request a sign-in to the Amazon Cognito user pool or even to a third-party IDP, but that's optional. That's only if you use an external IDP provider. So Cognito will then require additional challenges. So imagine that you have configured multi-factor authentication, so the user would need to introduce an additional code. And then the user tried to fulfill those challenges. So if that's successful, tokens are going to be generated, and the Amazon Cognito user pools are going to be passing the tokens to the application. And finally, the application will provide the access tokens and retrieve the data from an API, a database, or whatever you have configured. On the other hand, we have identity pools. An Amazon Cognito identity pool should be used when you want to authorize authenticated or anonymous users to access your AWS resources. Identity pools don't require integration with a user pool, but they can be integrated with one. For authenticated users, it supports Amazon Cognito user pools, social sign-in, like for example Facebook, OpenID Connect providers or OIDC, and SAML providers. And that's what normally corporations are using for single sign-on. Finally, the permissions for each authenticated and non-authenticated users are controlled through IAM roles that you create and attach to the identity pool. Now let's have a look at how the identity pool flow looks like. First of all, the user would authenticate and then request an access token or an assertion in case of SAML. And that can be done either against the Cognito user pool or a third-party identity provider. Then once the user has been authenticated, it will pass the developer authorization, the token or the assertion to the identity pool. The identity pool would request the role through STS, so it would generate temporary credentials for the role that has been assigned to that user or group of users. And then finally, the identity pool would pass back the role credentials, the temporary credentials to the user in the application. So before we finish, I wanted to explain how the entire picture looks like when you use both the user pool and the identity pool. So you would have here your application. The user would authenticate in order to get those tokens in JWT format, and that can be done with local identities, with social sign-in, OIDC, and so on, as we saw, or even custom if the developers are creating a custom authentication flow. Then with those tokens, the user or the app would change the tokens for AWS credentials through STS, as we just saw. And then with those credentials, the application would be able to interact with services like, for example, DynamoDB, S3, or others. Okay, so as a summary of this lesson, I just wanted to go through the main use cases for both user pools and identity pools. So you should use user pools whenever you are designing a sign-up or sign-in web pages for your application, whenever you want to access and manage user data, to track your user device, location, and IP address and adapt to sign-in requests of different risk levels. So for example, you could enforce MFA for risky sign-ins. And finally, to use a custom authentication flow for your application. When it comes to identity pools use cases, you should be using this whenever you want to give your user access to AWS resources, such as an Amazon S3 bucket or a DynamoDB table, or whenever you want to generate temporary AWS credentials using STS for authenticated and unauthenticated users. So that's all for this lesson. Hope you like it and see you in the next one. Bye.